All right, let's move on and take a quick look at the limitations of 401ks that you need to be aware of so that you can make a fully informed decision about whether or not it's a smart move for you to max out your contributions. Now, I mentioned this at the beginning of the presentation, but it bears repeating. Every single financial product on the market, whether it's an investment like a mutual fund or stocks or bonds, or a plan like a 401k or IRA, or a loan or insurance or credit cards, whatever it is, it's going to have positives and negatives associated with it. So again, I'm not saying 401ks are bad. I'm just saying you need to have a more complete picture before you decide how you're going to go about funding it. Because the only way that you can exceed those limitations is to recognize them, accept them, and then build your understanding of them. And only then can you design a way to go beyond those limitations. Now, here's the analogy that I like to use in our live workshops. I want you to think about gravity for a moment. Obviously, I can't do this exactly the way that I would in our workshops because I don't have that live interaction with you. But if you agree that there are certain limitations that gravity imposes on us as human beings, my questions are these. One, do you think we would have ever been able to exceed those limitations if we didn't recognize that gravity exists? Secondly, what if we recognized it, but we just didn't accept that it was real? And third, what if we recognized it, accepted it, but then never went about building our understanding of it? Would we still have figured out what it takes to exceed the limitations of gravity and learned how it's possible for us to fly? Now, in our workshops, the answer I get from the crowd is always no. But thankfully, we did do all of those things. And now we exceed the limitations of gravity on a daily basis. There are literally millions of people flying all over the world every single day. Now, is that because we changed the laws of gravity? No, of course not. But by recognizing, accepting, and then building our understanding of gravity, as well as other forces, we were able to design and build a way for us to exceed its limitations. So we didn't change the laws, we just figured out a way to better harmonize with them. Well, the same idea applies to financial instruments like 401k plans and mutual funds and life insurance and mortgages and all these financial tools that we have at our disposal. The more we know about the good and the bad, the better we can design ways to mitigate the bad and maximize the good. And that's why I want to shed some light on these issues so that you can start asking the right questions and getting some answers about how to deal with these negatives in the most effective manner so that you can mitigate the negative effect that they're going to have on your retirement wealth building efforts. And you'll notice on this slide that I've got one of my favorite quotes up here. Prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. And every time I see one of these blanket recommendations advising folks to max out their 401ks, this always pops into my head because inevitably the article or the news segment or wherever it is that the advice is coming from, it's almost guaranteed that they only talk about the positive stuff about 401ks. They never seem to mention the inherent negatives built into these qualified plans. Now, what I've got listed here are the typical positives that you always hear about when you're seeing 401ks. You've got the systematic savings, the tax deferred growth, employer matching, possibly, again, it's not a guarantee, and they could match at one point and then decide not to match at another point. You've got limited borrowing in the account, and it avoids probate. But I'm not here to tell you what you already know, so let's move on to the negatives you've probably never heard about. Now, the first one here, the penalty for early withdrawal, probably isn't new to you. And I've even seen it presented as a positive because they'll say that the penalty is good because it keeps you on track. But when you consider that liquidity, use, and control of your own money is one of the key foundations for wealth building, maxing out your 401k contributions beyond your employer's match, assuming your plan even offers one, may not be the best plan of attack because you're giving up that liquidity, use, and control. The next one is the fact that you have limited investment choices in most plans. Then we've got no completion provision for disability or death. Now you're probably thinking, Yeah, but no retirement plan will have disability or death completion provision. And you'd be right if you were limiting your options to qualified plans only. But those aren't your only options. There are other ways to create tax deferred and even tax free growth for yourself. The question is, has anyone discussed your other options with you? You've got no tax write off for investment losses. If your account experiences a loss for the year or even a few years, you basically have to just grin and bear it. You can't use those losses to create any kind of offset in other areas like other investment gains or just off of your income. The limited borrowing that I mentioned on the previous slide as a possible pro comes with some really, really bad hidden terms. And I'm not even talking about the interest rate or the amount of time that you have to pay back the loan. I'm talking about something that you'll never see in the paperwork, which is the fact that you'll be repaying the loan with after-tax dollars. So when you get to retirement and you start making withdrawals from that money that you paid back, you end up getting double taxed on that money. Never, never borrow from a 401k if you can possibly avoid it. There's no guarantee of age distribution. It's not available for gifting. It's subject to estate taxes. And the IRS, let me just say, is really, really good at getting their money. And you have to remember that when you put money into a 401k or other qualified plan where you're deferring the taxes, all of that money in that account is not all yours. You still have to pay the piper when you get to retirement and start withdrawing that money out. And Uncle Sam is extremely, extremely talented at getting their money. And that's what happens when Uncle Sam gets to write the rules. He tends to stack the odds in his favor and not yours. Moving on, there's no college funding options available with a 401k. You have no potential to create cash flow efficiency for yourself because a 401k is what's known as a standalone asset. So there's no way to involve it in what's known as a money in motion type of process, which could create a greater velocity and a faster growth pattern for your money. And finally, every dollar withdrawn in retirement will come out taxed at ordinary income tax rates. So even though your 401k is a long-term growth account, you can't take advantage of the lower capital gains rate. Now, I know that the conventional wisdom at this point would say, yeah, but I'm going to be in a lower tax bracket when I retire. Since this is only an overview presentation, I won't be getting into the details of the fallacy behind that assumption, but let me give you this to think about. With a multi-trillion-dollar budget deficit, huge numbers of baby boomers retiring, the continuing war on terror, and now a possible subprime mortgage bailout plan, where do you think rates are headed in the future? You think they're going down? Do you think they're going to stay the same? Or do you think there's a good possibility that they may be going higher?